My name is Manuel Medrano, AKA Cricket. I was a member of the Arizona Mexican Mafia, and this is how crime works. For the most part, if you look at the victims of the Mexican Mafia, they're gonna be other members of the Mexican Mafia. Looking back, I mean, it's ridiculous. No matter what, you're always gonna find some kind of villain amongst yourself. You know, it's just the hypocrisy of being a part of this organization. When I was 17, I was transferred to adult court. I had been in a lot of trouble already as a juvenile. So they transferred me to adult court in 1995. Going to prison originally, they gave me 6.5 years. My original crime, I was charged with an armed robbery. It was a carjacking. You know, I just wanted to be part of the cool crowd, and that's what it was. The members of the Mexican Mafia were somebody that we had all heard of throughout our time. You know, as juveniles, as kids, we looked up to these guys. So when I got there, my crime was dangerous enough to where I ended up on a higher level yard. And so I just jumped head on into, you know, obligating myself to the organization. And like any other youngster, they used me to do multiple things. I mean, stabbings, moving drugs. I was in a gang as a kid. I was from a neighborhood in the west side of Phoenix. You heard about these Mexican Mafia members that ran stuff. You heard about the homicides they committed in prison. Everything sounded so glamorous the way they put it. And that movie, American Me, had come out. And that really had a huge influence on us. After the movie came out, everybody was running around with their shirts buttoned all the way to the top. To become a member, it's not necessarily a myth that you have to kill somebody. However, there's a lot of favoritism. There's a lot of nepotism. So there's a lot of people that get accepted and get made without the actual homicide having been done. But it's a, you know, expectation that they will kill for the organization when the time comes. At the time, I think the count was 150 members total. We like to think about it as, you know, we're the elite of the prisoner system. Originally, when I was made, I had not killed anybody yet. My high-ranking member took a liking to me, and so he pushed my, well, there was a couple of them, but they pushed my name through, and I was voted on, and I became a member. Within a few months, I did kill another member in bad standing, and that solidified it. I think it took me a while to get to that point, and I think there's a way to stop it before it goes that far. I regret it all. The patch itself in Arizona, the tattoo that they wear, it's a sun with the double M that comes down into double swords at the bottom. It has a saber-toothed skull above the two M's in the middle, and then a black rose in between the double M's. Only people that have killed a member in bad standing or a member in the old Mexican Mafia can even put that black rose in the middle of the patch. There is no motto per se. Everybody speaks about this cause that we have. It's a recruitment tool. They talk about cultural aspects of it, the Aztec, the Mayans, you know, try to put that kind of spin on it and just make you be prideful in your race. I used to tell younger people about the cause that we were fighting for, and if they were to ask me to define it, I wouldn't be able to. You know, in the end, it's just about drugs and money and, you know, power. You know, that's all it is. The main rules, I mean, they have the no snitching, no homosexuality. At one time, no drugs. You were not allowed to partake in any kind of drugs. That changed later. A lot of these rules are broken multiple times. I mean, if you see a member in bad standing or a member of the old at any time, if the doors were to pop, you have to try to kill them. When you're in this SHU program, a lot of the times the guards will make a mistake and open the doors on accident. And so you always have to be ready for that. You know, you're up all day waiting for that, basically. You're always supposed to be ready for war. And the money situation, everything has to go up as it comes in. The rule is that you spread it amongst the brothers, those that are within your ranking system. As a normal carnal without rank, you're just considered a brother. Then there'll be the ranking system. You have a captain, a lieutenant, a sergeant. You know, you have a lieutenant that has 3 sergeants. Then the 3 sergeants each have 5 or 6 carnales under them. The money will go up through that pyramid. That's where a lot of the problems obviously come in, because people feel that money is always being held back, and so that rule will be broken quite often. The biggest rule is to always maintain contact. One of the reasons a lot of members have been killed is because when they get out of prison, they kind of just forget about everything. They stop contact. They just move on with their lives. A lot of the times the problem is they don't change their lives, so they continue with crime, and they'll get locked back up, go in there and try to give excuses as to why they couldn't write, or, you know, whatever their little, you know, whatever the excuses are. And for the most part, it never works. And so a lot of members have been killed behind that rule alone. It started in California in the early 50s, 57, I believe. But the Arizona faction started in the early 70s by 3 juveniles, actually, that came into the system, and they started La Familia, and then shortly thereafter took on the name Mexican Mafia. Arizona had some influence from California, but was also autonomous, and now they are basically, it's not together necessarily, but friendly and on working terms. The administration was originally the ones that named them old and new, but they were all the same thing at one point. These are members that just split into 2 factions. It was just an internal struggle, if you will. The organizations themselves kind of used it as a way, I guess, just to keep it straight as well. They would say, you know, in Spanish, we're from the nueva, the new. They're from the vieja, the old. I never got rank. I wasn't a sergeant, lieutenant, none of that stuff. I was just a member. The 5 captains were the main ones that everyone knew, and those 5 captains sat at the, we call it the mesa, the table. We have the mesa system or table system where everything is voted on through them. So you had to be a captain with a black rose to sit at the table. The 5 captains set all the rules, the regulations, they changed the rules. All the politicking would go through them. We're still all supposed to be brothers, and we're all supposed to be equal. Even, you know, that's it's in name only. That is the way it's supposed to be. Obviously, the captains have a lot more power, but again, it's more of a popularity contest. If you're a brother, you basically are expected to know what it is you're supposed to be doing, whether that's establishing stores on the yards, getting rid of people that shouldn't be on the yard, bringing in dope, or collecting dope on the yards. In Arizona, our main rival, as I was coming in as a youngster, was with the old Mexican Mafia. The administration tried their best to keep them protected. They have a thing where it was called protective segregation. In the later years of the 90s, we started having problems with a group that started calling themselves the Border Brothers. That became a real big thing, and California at this point was behind the Border Brothers as well. So we were actually in a war for quite a few years against Mexican nationals or Border Brothers and California, people that were born in California. The Mexican Mafia wanted to be the only organization that had a patch as far as on the Hispanic side, the Mexican side. The Border Brothers started wearing a patch. They started being hit throughout the system, and there started being riots. It was probably about a 3 or 4 year time frame where it was going on. In Arizona, they also have an Aryan Brotherhood that it was faction off of the California Aryan Brotherhood. It was actually a California member that came into our system. The Arizona guys kind of home grew it after that. We did align with them only because of obviously the offense to the black gangs. It was just a loose allegiance. I mean, or alignment, more of just friends. If there was something that the whites did wrong, we could go to them and they would take care of it themselves, and vice versa. You know, obviously if they bring in drugs, they don't have to give a portion to the Mexican Mafia, and vice versa. Everything stays within your own race, and when it comes to that. The blacks had multiple gangs. They had the Mau Mau's, Crip gang, they had the Muslims. All of them were kind of against each other, and the Aryan Brotherhood was against all of them. I was part of a riot on the Santa Rita Yard in Tucson, and I got stabbed in my neck. And I spoke to my mom, and my mom was born in Mexico. And when I told her what was happening, she was like, "What are you guys are ridiculous. Like, what are you talking about? It's your same people." And I would tell her, "No, you know, it's different, Ma. You don't know. You know, you don't understand." And she would just be, you know, she would cuss me out in Spanish, just, you know, "You guys are stupid," kind of. And, you know, now that I can look back and I can see there's no big bad wolf out there that we were fighting against. For the most part, our victims were ourselves. There's not a lot of members on the street. We don't usually make it that long, because there's a whole task force that's established for the prison gang. It was called the Violent Street Gang Task Force. It was, I believe, 2 detectives from the Phoenix PD. They had members from the FBI, from every organization you could think of. And so those were the ones that were basically on us all the time. It was tough. They would follow me everywhere. I'd walk in restaurants and they'd be sitting and they're eating. They would go to houses of, you know, family of loved ones, and they would tell them, you know, "Hey, your son is hanging out with a real bad guy. He's suspected in multiple homicides." And they would just, you know, try to make it as tough as possible for me out there. So when there's a member that's going to get out or something, usually they're getting out with some established things that need to be done. The problem is some of these guys will get out, and even though they left the organization, they're still into drugs or into money or whatever. So they'll go back to their neighborhoods and they'll say who they were to try to get their neighborhood to give them drugs and money. And that'll always get back to a member in good standing. And so that's how we usually find them to be able to kill them. And me getting out, I did have a few names that I needed to, that were on the list to be killed. Upon being released, I right away tried to make connections with drug dealers that were already established on the streets. At first, I tried to use being a Mexican Mafia member to influence them, but that actually scared a lot of them away. People, there's a history of bullying amongst the Mexican Mafia, where they would approach these drug dealers with, you know, "Hey, we're the Mexican Mafia, and, you know, we want this and that," and they just take instead of, you know, there's no give back. So what I started doing really was, I had conversations with the guys, and I was like, "Listen, I understand our history. That's not what I'm about. The only thing I'm asking you to do is give me a better number than you give most people." At the time, methamphetamine was a big thing, and that's what I was mostly involved in. Pounds of methamphetamine I was sending to Kentucky, where it was double the price from Arizona. It wasn't like I had to send 80% of my proceeds to anybody. The established amount for non-members is they do have to give up a third of anything they bring into the system. So if you bring in 3 grams of heroin, 1 of those is going to the Mexican Mafia. But us, within ourselves, we're pretty free to make money and do whatever we need to do for that. It just comes down to that rule of staying in contact. So if you get a letter saying, "Hey, my sister needs, you know, a TV," then you get the sister a TV, and you're basically keeping people happy. Everything that came into prison was what was controlled by the Mexican Mafia. You couldn't bring dope in and make money without giving them their third. Now, with the connections to California and the cartels and stuff, things are a little bit more organized and established with the drug trade, and they started legitimate businesses and putting up car shops and different things like that. It depends on the members that are on the street. There was a few members in Tucson that were bringing tons and tons of dope from Mexico. They had that connection out there. I know California had a little bit more established connections with the Arellano Felix cartel at one point. It's not like saying the Mexican Mafia is working with the cartel. It's just, this member has a connection with the cartel. And if you need dope, we can get it, obviously. I mean, if you need 1,000 pounds, it'll be here. One of the big things that was happening in my day was coyoting, the Mexican nationals, bringing them over the border was a big thing. That was one of the things that was a little more organized. Usually we wouldn't do it ourselves. We're not gonna take that type of risk, but you could send your soldiers that are looking up to you to go bring 10, 20 of the, what they call chickens, pollos, across the border and bring the money back. And that was huge, and I believe still is. Just watching the news, you can see the stash houses that they catch were full of Mexican nationals being held, and that was the other side of it. A lot of them were sent to a stash house, and they would be held there until their family paid whatever was agreed upon. And yeah, absolutely, that's still happening. People usually come into the system already with a name. A lot of us did time together in juvenile hall, and so there's always some kind of connection. His dad may be in prison, his uncle. As people are coming into the system, you kind of know from their neighborhood or their family who they are. There is no obligation to the organization. You don't have to be a part of it. The only obligation you have is if there's a riot, you have to take part in it. It's as a Chicano or a Mexican. I really only took part in sponsoring one member. I recruited, I talked to younger kids about the cause, and I did all of that stuff as well. Everybody's paperwork is read when they're coming in the system. You would read people's case. The pre-sentence report was the biggest thing that would have a lot of clues. Anybody with a sex offense, there's no way that you're gonna become a member. Other than that, there are really no guidelines. If you don't even have to be Mexican to be in the Mexican Mafia. It's just a matter of, we say, what's in their heart. I mean, if they're willing to put in the work and be a part of it, then they can work their way into being that. In Arizona, we have no color system. In California, obviously, that's their thing. They have the sureños with the blue and stuff. Arizona doesn't have that. In Spanish, La M is just the M. It's just the shortening of the Mexican Mafia calling it La M. In Arizona, we don't use the black hand as a signifier. Some of the old Mexican Mafia did, but we have our own. I had the tattoo, the Mexican Mafia tattooed on my back. In Old English, yeah, 4-inch letters, huge. The government actually paid to cover it. I mean, it was crazy. I couldn't walk around the rest of my life with Mexican Mafia tattooed on my back like that. So, yeah, they paid to have it, a tattoo artist actually come in and cover it up for me. The Arizona Mexican Mafia uses a lot of Nahuatl, which is the Aztec language. A lot of members learned that throughout their time in prison. We would use it a lot to write each other. So for the purposes so administration couldn't read our letters kind of as code. There's been other codes that we've made and come up with in there, just kind of bingo type, codes where you put letters in different spots and only the other person would know it. And every member usually has a code name in Nahuatl as well. That way we could speak of other members without, or the facility knowing who we're talking about. It never works. They usually already know, but it's what we think at the time. The biggest way is through legal mail. You would get a case and print it out as thick as you can get it. In the back of one of the papers, you could write whatever needs to be sent. Now you have, 300 pages of something where one page in the middle somewhere may have a note in it. It's going to be real difficult to detect that, especially since they're not allowed to actually go through your legal mail the way they can regular mail. There's another way where it's kind of, you write with urine, and when they get it in prison, you could put fire to it and it'll come out kind of brown. The best way to send messages is just word of mouth. There's a lot of so-called secretaries, usually members' wives or girlfriends. Back then, we would have a girlfriend have 2 or 3 phones in her house, and different members would call from different facilities, and she would put the phones on speakerphone, and then we could just talk to each other that way directly. The biggest thing in prison was commissaries as good as money. Stamps was the big thing. That is the currency of prison. The NFL bets and all of that, everything was done in stamps. Dope you can buy with stamps. There was 2 ways that people could pay, or 3 actually. If you brought in cash, if you snuck cash in, cash was worth double. So if you had $100, it was worth $200. Commissary was 1 for 1. So I would give you a list the day before commissary of everything I wanted you to order for me. And, that's how you would pay me. Or you could do street to street, where your loved one would send the money to my loved one on the street. And in that case, you had 10 days for the money to be received by whoever I was receiving it. If it wasn't there within 10 days, it could double. When you're talking about the economy in prison, something that costs $20 on the street is worth, a couple hundred in prison. And so when these guards, you offer them that type of money, it's hard for them to say no. The integrity only takes them so far. Corruption is not difficult because they're human, especially when you're young and you're being offered big money and you're getting paid, $40,000 a year, and these guys are, waving, that amount of money to you for doing something that seems almost, too easy. Some of them will be relationships. The guys will get into a relationship with a woman guard, and then the woman just feels this obligation or love or need to please, and so they'll bring in anything. Sometimes they're lied to. Hey, I just need you to bring me this pair of shoes, but the pair of shoes is full of dope. They just don't know it. And sometimes they're told straight up what it is, and they're good with it. It just depends. I've seen guards open doors and let people go in and stab somebody. As far as training is concerned, that may be part of it. I've seen them as young as 20 years old, 21, they're just kids. And you're dealing with career criminals, people that have been in prison for the last 30 years. The incarceration rate in the United States, we're high up there in the world. Just putting someone in a cell for 5 years and then releasing them and expecting them to be different than they were 5 years ago that's not a plan. It's not going to happen. If anything, I think it makes you worse. In my day, there were no programs. You can get your GED, and that was basically it. Just giving people the tools to do something with their lives may even change them on the inside if you give them a little sense of worth. You know what I mean? When you're just sitting in there day to day feeling like you're warehoused, I think it takes some of the humanity away from you as well. You just fall in line with what's going on. And so the killing, the drugs, all this stuff just becomes normal. It's not hard to become a murderer. It's not hard to kill. And so I think the Department of Corrections would do everybody a favor if they did if they separated everybody in that way, younger from older, dangerous from non-dangerous. But they don't. Everybody just kind of gets mixed in. And again, I know it's difficult. It's, how many facilities can you have, and how many guards do you have to man these facilities? But in a perfect world, I think separation would be the best way. I was released in 2001 on parole, and I was out for 7 months. I went back in on just a possession of marijuana charge. I was out for 4.5 months, and I got locked back up. I was pulled over with a gun and in the car under the passenger seat. Even though I got found not guilty, the prosecution put in for the judge to violate my probation or my parole and sentenced me to 15 months in prison. I was released April of 2003. And then in May, we had the federal sting where they called the meeting at the embassy suites for all members. There was I think 13 or 14 of us on the street at the time. And we all went to this meeting where we talked about past stuff. I talked, homicides that we had done and future stuff, homicides that we were gonna do, drug deals that were on the horizon. And it was all a setup. One of the members, he was actually working for the feds. They had video cameras, audio, everything set up. And so 11 days after being released, I was rearrested. And I went back to prison, and I thought I was gonna get out from there. I didn't know, obviously, yet about the sting. I thought I was just arrested on my violation of parole. My son's mom, based on the fact that she had been arrested in our case, she had been indicted. A few members felt that she would be the weak link, so they had green-lighted her and they were gonna kill her. But no one spoke to me about it, and everybody, we were all there together. The people that made this decision, one of them lived right next door to me at the time. And so when the feds came and talked to me about it and showed me the proof of what, this conspiracy to kill her was about, and it wasn't necessarily that I didn't believe them, because I saw the proof. So when I got back to the pot, I brought it to their attention. I was first told that, the organization comes first. It's how, all this type of stuff. And I agreed, I knew that. However, I felt that I should have been at least included in the vote, this is my son's mom. She just had my son, little baby. They agreed and apologized and said it wasn't gonna happen, but that I needed to talk to her and ensure that she wasn't gonna speak out. But that was the issue. I had told her that she could tell on me. Go ahead and tell them whatever you need to tell them to get your case dismissed, plea bargain, whatever you gotta do. A couple weeks later, the feds came back with more info. They had a taped phone conversation where it was being sent out. And so immediately, the day the feds came with the information about the phone call is when I told them, hey, go pick her up, put her somewhere safe, and we'll start talking. They put her on the phone with me, and they had her checked into a hotel and with my son. I still remember, she was like, so you're gonna flip? She goes, what the is wrong with you? And I was like, what do you want me to do? They're gonna kill you. What do you want me to do? I can't just leave you at the house. And that was the end. That was the beginning of the end, I guess. They sent me to the CCA, and then I was there in the hole or segregation for about, I think, 4 or 5 more years. Was the end of my criminal career, I guess you would call it. I think that was the hardest time. I was, at the same time, I was on lockdown 23 hours a day. And in fact, they had enhanced security measures on me because I had went to that CCA. And so the marshals had put all these extra security measures on me where I had to be housed alone, wreck alone, shower alone. A lieutenant or above had to be there to take me out of my cell. But I still thought that I was gonna get, life. I never in my wildest dreams thought that I was ever gonna get out. I was in until 2015, and now I've been out about 9 years. This other side that I'm doing now with, speaking out against it, I think I owe it. There's a lot of kids that look up to this, that think that this is something that is honorable, and it's just not. Me and my son's mom started the nonprofit phase 2 of life. Our target is the at-risk youth and trying to keep these kids, at the very least, away from these prison gangs, but if we can, away from prison in general. This is just about going into juvenile facilities, schools, talking to these kids. We've done fundraisers where we do back-to-school backpacks. We've given PE equipment to schools. We're just trying to do little things in the community, but in the long run, our hope is to, for this nonprofit to have its own facility where we can offer these kids some kind of trade, some sense of self-worth, and have us there as adult guidance for these guys. A lot of these kids don't have that. I've talked to lots of people now. I've made contacts through, the YouTube channel, crazy as it sounds. I have a couple members reaching out to me that are still active and telling me things that are going on within the organization now. And I think it's a good way to know, the happenings of today. They're no different than before. It's the same drama, the same stuff. Obviously, if I wouldn't have done what I've been doing, this type of stuff, nobody would know what I look like. I've burnt myself by doing what I do, but all of the older members that I did time with are either doing life or they're out of the game altogether. I think that the glamour behind it has been overblown. Those movies, American Me and Blood In, Blood Out, were significant in making younger individuals, kids, with easily influenced minds, see this as a glamorous thing to be a part of. Although these are smart individuals, they're convicts, and for the most part, they're drug addicts. They're not the elite that people would like to, that we would like to portray ourselves as. That's what I want to put out there more than anything, is these kids to know that hype is just that. There's no cause, there's no family. These aren't your brothers. You're gonna end up hurting your real family, your own. Everything that you love and that loves you, for a bunch of fools that are just playing pretend.